Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our December Cabinet meeting. Do we have any apologies for absence? No? Okay, thank you for that. Any declarations of interest in relation to the meeting this evening? Item number 3, then, are the minutes of the last meeting. These are on pages 3 to 12 of the packs that you have been sent. Can members confirm that they are a true record?
Happy to move.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We move then to item number 4 on our agenda today, and this is on pages 13 to 34 of the packs. And this is our October Revenue Budget Monitor Report. So this is the mid-year revenue update that's been presented to Cabinet, and this explains the current forecast position of the authority as of October 2022. Now, colleagues, as you'll be aware, the purpose of the report is to highlight the current forecast position on the Council's revenue budget and the financial risks and opportunities that present themselves. Turning to the report itself, against a net budget of £343 million, the October revenue position currently forecasts an overspend of £1.4 million, which represents less than 0.5% variance against budget. This overspend is after the use of all revenue budget contingencies of £4.7 million included in the 2022-23 revenue budget, as agreed by Cabinet in February 2022. Despite having established sizable budget contingencies for the 2022-23 year to deal with COVID legacy issues, crucially, new issues have emerged since that budget was agreed. The agreed NJC and Teachers' Pay Award for 22-23 is higher than the provisional allowed for. Increased demand and therefore overspending on housing budgets, specifically in relation to homelessness provision, and as we've discussed many times, an increase in demand for children's social care, specifically in relation to placement costs. As shown in the report and its appendices, coupled with the pay award impact, the current position can be explained in the following way. There is significant overspending in some key demand areas and other emerging risks within service areas, which have been partially offset by savings against revenue budget contingencies that have been made available to the Council, the Council Tax Reduction Scheme, and other non-service budgets. Some areas throughout the authority are reporting significant overspends against specific activities. These overspends relate to demand-led activity areas such as social services, and therefore there is an inherent risk that they may change should demand levels change from current forecasts during the remainder of the year. So, turning to consider then key areas that contribute to this position. The key areas include increased demand across key social care areas, including children's out-of-area and emergency placements. And these two areas alone, colleagues, contribute an overspend of almost £3.4 million to the overall service position. The impact of the 22-23 pay award has been confirmed. The average increase for council staff will be in the region of 6.4%. But this is compared to only 4% provision in the budget. This represents a forecast overspend of £2.4 million for non-school-based staff. Significant pressures are evident within housing and communities in relation to homelessness. An overspend of £3.1 million is forecast. And these can be largely attributed to the following main issues. The large number of individuals and households accommodated in temporary accommodation, reflecting a continuation of the position from the COVID period. The lack of suitable accommodation options, resulting in significant use of hotel and B&B options at a much higher cost than more traditional options. The cap on housing benefit subsidy, resulting in only a proportion of these costs being covered by the Department for Works and Pensions. In addition to these continued risks, there are also issues that have emerged this year that will continue to be closely monitored. These include, but are not restricted to, education, where specifically SEN Transport is forecasting an overspend due to higher operator costs resulting from the inflation, and of course there is a shortfall as well in relation to some income in that area in relation to car parking. We do anticipate that there will be an overspend in this area of service as we approach year end, and of course there are further pressures evident within our fleet maintenance as a result of rising fuel prices, as well as increased costs associated with maintenance. We're also facing an anticipated shortfall against the delivery of 21-22 and prior year savings, and this is around £541,000, and this is largely due to delays in progressing the necessary actions, and some of this is a result of the pandemic. Now, whilst the level of unachieved savings in relation to the current financial year has improved and is lower than in previous years, there does remain a need to ensure that all savings are delivered in full as soon as possible, and that officers continue to take action to ensure that these are delivered from the earliest opportunity. Underspending against both the core revenue contingency budget and the other temporary contingencies provide mitigation against serviced area overspending. The forecast underspend of £4.7 million is shown against non-service budgets. In addition, there's a forecast underspend of £2.3 million against capital financing, and this is specifically on PFI interest, and over £1 million forecast saving against the Council Tax Reduction Scheme budget. I'd like us to consider our schools. Schools are separately projected to have an overspend of £5.6 million. A proportion of this will have been planned, and this will reduce school reserves by that amount. As well as the impact of a higher pay award compared to the budget increase allowed for, schools are drawing down on reserves built up over the previous 2 years as they move to catch up and strengthen provision after the impacts of COVID and catch up on maintenance and related improvements. Robust monitoring needs to be maintained in this area, as whilst no schools have set a deficit budget, there are a couple of schools that have entered an in-year deficit position following the impact of the pay award being reflected in individual school forecasts, and we do need to be mindful of that. Overall, the current position on school balances represents an improvement from concerns in previous years. However, it does remain important that we continue to closely scrutinise these budgets. Now, at this point, colleagues, I'm just going to pause and invite any questions or comments. Deputy Leader.
Thank you, Leader. I just want to highlight that we did not anticipate being in this position. Effectively, we have an overspend due to inflation, pay awards that have come out as a result of the rising cost of living. The cost of living has an impact on us as a local authority as well. Energy costs, none of us anticipated the extortionate rises that have taken place. And of course, there are increasing demands on our service. That has reflected the consequence of Brexit, the consequence of the pandemic and the increasing poverty amongst within our local communities means there's a greater need for us to help and support where we possibly can. These demands were unexpected. However, I'm proud as a council that what we're doing is prioritising our residents and continuing to put them first in what we do. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much for that, and a very important and timely contribution there, Deputy Leader. Thank you. Councillor Petruni.
Does the protocol to stand up? I'm still... Yeah, okay. I just want to talk about pay and the pressure on pay, but to emphasise that our staff, over the years, due to austerity inflicted by us, by the UK government, over a decade, have paid the price of that. And so the pay award and the additional pressure that is putting on our budget is rewarding our staff for the hard work and the dedication they've put over that decade, but also during the pandemic. And we must recognise that and be proud of that, and that's what we're doing. And just to put this into context, because I hear some nonsense from the Conservatives in the UK government about public sector price inflation, and that will drive inflation. Our average settlement for us is 6.4%. The average from the private sector, according to the ONS 2 days ago, was 6.9%. The average for public sector is just over 3%. So we're not even matching private sector wage growth in our budget today. So that reflects that public sector are paying the price of Tory failure year after year after year. And here we are again, cleaning up their mess and delivering for the staff for us. So although it's a pressure on our budget, we should be proud that we're paying it because our staff deserve it.
Absolutely, Councillor Petruni. And I'm sure colleagues would join you in stressing the importance of our staff and how we value the work that they do. Any further contributions from Cabinet colleagues? Okay. So we've had an opportunity to consider the report, and what I'd like to emphasise, I suppose, at this point is that as we progress into the second half of the financial year, the position continues to be subject to change, and new issues and also opportunities will emerge. Now, the overspending reported has reduced compared to the last Cabinet update, but clearly the position currently being reported is concerning. And I know that as Cabinet members, you're all monitoring this very closely through the performance of your service plans as well. So thank you for that. Now, you'll all be aware that in an effort to achieve a reduction in this and a move towards a balanced position, service areas have been asked to reduce or stop non-essential spending wherever opportunities lie. And I think it's really important we continue to monitor this going forwards. So I suppose the final point in relation to this is, whilst we're looking at this and it's a reflection on a period in time, it is important for all of our services to understand any longer-term impacts of the challenges being faced, and also to identify strategies for minimising those impacts. So, colleagues, having had an opportunity to consider this report and to discuss its contents, we're asked to note the forecast position, to agree that the Chief Executive and the Executive Board continue to review and challenge service area forecasts, to note the risks clearly identified throughout the report, to note the forecast movements in reserves, and to note the overall position in relation to schools. Yes.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you very much for that, and thank you all for your contributions there. We move then to item 5 on our agenda today, and this is the Revenue Budget, Draft Budget and MTFP final proposals for 2023-24. Now, this is quite a comprehensive set of papers, and these can be found in the packs from page 35 to 216. Now, colleagues, this report highlights the key issues affecting the development of the Council's 2023-24 budget and medium-term financial plan. As a Cabinet, we're asked to agree the proposals in order to enable the commencement of the 2023-24 budget consultation process. The results of the consultation will be reported back to us as Cabinet in February 2023, where we, as a Cabinet, will agree a final detailed budget and recommend the corresponding council tax level to full council. Unfortunately, colleagues, budget preparations this year have presented a distinct set of challenges. Not only have we been required to build on the unprecedented circumstances of the last few years, but we've also been faced with drastic economic changes over an incredibly short period of time. This, on top of the impact of 12 years of UK Conservative government and a decade of austerity, has led to the country facing a deep recession, and we know that households are facing the biggest fall in living standards on record. The challenge that we face is being felt across the whole of the UK, and you'll be well aware that councils, just like our residents, are dealing with pressures on a scale never seen before. High inflation, soaring energy bills, and increasing demand for services are resulting in substantial budget pressure. And as a council, we are seeing significant budget shortfalls over the immediate and medium term. This has resulted in a considerable budget gap of 27 million between the money available to spend and what we need to spend. Yesterday, the Minister for Finance and Local Government said that the 2023-24 draft budget has been one of the most toughest since devolution because of the significant financial pressures we're facing, caused by the UK government's mismanagement of the UK economy and made worse by the disastrous mini-budget in September. She also stressed that Wales is facing a perfect storm of pressures and was very clear that the Welsh Government budget was a budget in hard times. Based on plans published in the Welsh Government budget last year, local authorities were expecting a 3.5% increase to our financial settlement in 2023-24. We are grateful indeed to our Welsh Labour Government for prioritising the public services that are delivered through local government in their budget yesterday. This year's provisional local government settlement shows an increase equivalent to 7.9%, more than double the anticipated rise. This is still a tough settlement, which falls short of the funding needed to meet all of the inflationary pressures being faced by services, and will mean that local authorities do face difficult decisions as they set their budgets. This remains the case for Newport today, even allowing for the fact that Welsh Government has today confirmed an 8.9% increase in core funding for our council, which reflects an improved settlement in comparison with the indicative settlement figure provided a year ago. The council is required by law to set a balanced budget every year. Therefore, there's been a need to consider all potential options for addressing the budget gap of £27 million in 23-24. This deliberation, as I've already said, has been against a backdrop of a period of sustained budget savings over the last decade of austerity. So what are our key areas of investment? Now, overall, the draft budget includes investment of £45 million in 2023-24 and £94 million over the life of the medium-term financial plan. Although 77% of this is to fund pay and pricing inflationary increases, I would like to specifically mention the areas of investment that we, as a Cabinet, believe are the areas in greatest need. And of course, I wish we were in a position whereby we had additional resources to invest in many other areas, but this is simply not an option with the limited resources available to us. Turning firstly to our schools. In relation to schools, we recognise that they, like all council services, are facing significant inflationary pressures and cost increases. As has been stated on a number of previous occasions, this Cabinet are committed to supporting schools and will continue to protect them as much as possible. This commitment is reflected in the choice to wait for the draft local government settlement to be announced today before announcing a draft proposal for schools, in the hope that a more positive settlement would facilitate a greater degree of protection. However, whilst the draft settlement is more positive than initially anticipated, the extent of the financial challenge being faced means that it is not possible to completely shield schools from the need to contribute towards the Council's budget gap in 2023-24. Therefore, like all services, we are proposing that schools contribute towards a proportion of the pressures identified in relation to them. As a result, we will be consulting on a proposal whereby the Council provides additional funding to schools to cover the cost impact of increasing pupil numbers and 50% of the identified pay-related pressures. This means that schools will be required to absorb the balance of pay pressures and any other inflationary increases in costs. However, and it is important to note, colleagues, that this does mean that overall, the cash value of the total school budget will increase in comparison with the current budget. As always, as a Cabinet, we are keen to hear feedback from schools and encourage both individual school representatives and collective groups to engage in the consultation process and provide views on the proposal set out today. This Cabinet is committed to listening to the views put forward, and we will consider these before finalising proposals in February. Moving then to social care and homelessness, this budget proposes to invest over £4 million in social care in 2023-24 and almost £5.5 million over the medium term to help support our most vulnerable. We also propose a £3.5 million provision to support Welsh Government's directive to ensure that there are no rough sleepers in Newport. We continue to deliver a huge amount of support to rough sleepers following the pandemic and have found accommodation so that many individuals and families who have found themselves in a difficult position can be rehoused. This investment will enable us to continue to do so. Now, further detailed investments will be agreed at the final budget in the Cabinet's February meeting, and the Cabinet and I will consider feedback from consultation. We're particularly interested to hear views on our key priority areas of schools, social care and homelessness, as well as feedback on specific budget investments. We do, however, need to consider how we address the gap in funding. After allowing for the investments outlined and the indicative funding increases outlined by Welsh Government a year ago, a significant gap between estimated costs and funding existed. Now, as a Cabinet, we've considered options for addressing this gap, including a further increase in council tax and savings from across all council services. With regards to council tax, the position and figures set out in the report are based on a 9.5% increase in 2023-24. Now, colleagues, For contextual purposes, 9.5% is a weekly increase of between £1.55 and £2.07 for properties in bands A to C. And these are the most common bands that we have here in Newport. It's well documented that Newport's council tax is low compared to others in Wales, generating 23% of the council's income. This council's average council tax rate is 15% lower than the Welsh average. And even with a 9.5% increase next year, our council tax will still be lower than most, if not all, of the neighbouring authorities, even if they have a lower level of increase. I know that the continued financial crisis is causing financial hardship and challenges for residents and businesses in our city, and that this will be at the heart of our considerations when we plan next year's budget. Like all councils across Wales and the rest of the UK, Newport is facing its own unprecedented challenge. And in order to address that challenge, we do need to consider making savings as well. After allowing for a 9.5% council tax increase and the approach outlined earlier on schools, a residual budget gap does still remain, and a range of savings have been considered, and a total of £11.6 million have been agreed for the purpose of public consultation. Now, colleagues, you'll all be aware of this. These proposals are detailed within the appendices of the report and reflect an in-depth review of all council services, including back office functions, as well as frontline services. At this point, I'd really like to stress how important it is to highlight that this hasn't been an easy process to undertake, and any decisions which have led to this set of proposals have not been taken lightly. And at that point, I'll pause and invite comments from colleagues. Deputy Leader.
Thank you, Leader. It has indeed been a really difficult settlement. We have to remember that Welsh Government, essentially, despite promises from national government in relation to settlements to schools and the NHS, actually, the Welsh Government was actually £1.2 billion worse off than in previous years. And it has been, consequently, we've seen that settlement come down to us. I'm very grateful, therefore, that with the additional funding that we've had from Welsh Government, which I know they've strived hard to support us with, we've been able to give this settlement towards our schools. It's difficult for them. I appreciate there's members of teaching staff in the room at the moment, and I know it's going to be really difficult for them to set balanced budgets, but they have our support. We're here to listen to them, and please come to us for support and advice. But this was the best that we could offer. We've strived hard to our best support you, and what we recognise is one of the key pressures for you is the increasing staff costs, hence the support and recognition of that. What I also wanted to say was in relation to the proposed 9.5% council tax rise, is that, as I always say, that we have to remember that we have a council tax reduction scheme. Now, in London, I beg your pardon, in England, the Tory government actually removed this. This is not something that happens in English. The Welsh government has managed to continue to fully fund this. And that's a promise that, again, that was made by Rebecca yesterday in her speech in the Senedd. And we have to remember those residents who are entitled to apply for it are those who are on JSA, employment support allowance, pension credit and income support, and those pensioners who've got less than £16,000 in their savings. So what I do is implore residents, whoever cannot afford to pay their council tax, look to see whether they're entitled to the council tax support fund, and they can apply through local council. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Deputy Leader. Councillor Harvey.
Thanks, Leader. I agree with the comments that's been made thus far. It is hard. It's been very hard. We all know that we've been doing this since September, and we have done it the best way that could possibly be done. It's all right, the Argus promoting, woo, got extra money for Newport. Taking the account of inflation, it's not anywhere near what we should be receiving. And this going out is exactly what it says. It's a consultation. It's not a given. It's not a definite. We're listening to what residents want, and we want them to feed back to us. Ultimately, as has been mentioned already, we have got in-work poverty for the first time in my living memory. We have had 12 years, of Conservative government rule. We have been crippled left, right and centre. Inflation at 11% when it was only at 2%. The knock-on effect of that is astronomical. We have got people coming home from work unable to feed their children or keep the house warm. What do I do? How can I do this? We as councillors are running around Newport handing out food parcels because people can't afford to buy food. In what planet is it normal in 2022 where people are going to work and still can't feed their children? It's horrific, and it's down to the mismanagement of UK government, and they can moan and oh yeah, what about Welsh government? The money comes from UK government. That is where the blame should be laid. That is where the blame belongs. We are doing everything we can to support our residents, to support our schools, our social services. We do over 800 services from this council, and you can't do that on a shoestring. And unfortunately, that's what we've got, is a shoestring. Thanks, Leader.
Thank you very much, Councillor Harvey. Councillor Clark.
Thank you. I wasn't going to speak, but I think maybe it's necessary. I think it's been highlighted, and I think it should continue to be highlighted how difficult times are going to be. The cost of living crisis is affecting all of us. Our friends, our neighbours, our families. But the point I want to make is that you'll hear, and I've heard it, and you'll continue to hear this from the UK government and certain sections of the media, that we're all in it together. We're all in the same boat. Let me tell you, we're not in the same boat. We're in the same storm, but we're not in the same boat. I was out this morning at 6 o'clock with my work colleagues. I was talking to friends and relatives who are struggling to pay the heating. They've got smart meters and they're watching their clocks go up. You go around someone elderly who've got a shawl around them and money's tight, then they can't afford to feed. The children, the parents of Newport. And then you could argue you've got a Conservative chair in Westminster who wanted the taxpayer to pay for the heating in his stables. So we're not all in the same boat. What I would say is, for the people in Newport, is remember we're a listening council. It is going out to consultation. It is important to hear your views. It is going to be tough. But you voted this council in, this Labour council, and we will get through this. It'll be hard, but we will get through this. But get involved. Do get involved. Let's hear your voices. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Councillor Lacey.
Thank you, Leader. Let's not forget that the Tories in Westminster broke the economy. A decade of poor growth is holding us back, and 12 years of Conservative government at Westminster are the cause. 12 years of austerity has failed us all. Boris's shambles of a government cost the economy billions, and to top it off, along came Trussonomics. We now have inflation in double figures. Energy costs are soaring with no support for the public sector. All this, what was already going to be a tough budget. We'll support the families, communities and businesses across Newport as best we can. But under Tories, working people foot the bill, and we are now left to make the hard decisions. We clearly welcome the increased settlement, but this will still not cover our shortfall. Therefore, I support the proposals in front of us today and welcome the feedback from residents during this consultation period. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lacey. Councillor Hughes.
Thank you, Leader. I think in the autumn that we saw this sort of pebble of chaos, I think we can call it, dropped into that muddy lake now that is Tory Westminster. Those ripples now are what we're facing. They're coming out and they're causing chaos and they're making life very, very difficult. And what they show as well is the undervalue of local authorities in Westminster. My colleagues in social care are facing very, very tough decisions. And those decisions impact on real lives, and they're very, very aware of that. And as a result of that chaos in Westminster, those decisions made, as I said, undervalue all the work that we've done and all the work that we hope to do. In social care, we will continue to focus on the statutory functions that keep our people safe in the city. And while we still have very many tough decisions to make, I think all our I'd like to thank the social care staff that are involved in those decisions, because I know that they're very, very difficult for them because they care for people. I welcome the investment that we're able to make, but what I would ask is that people take the consultation seriously and that they do contribute to that consultation, because I really hope that that can make a difference to some of the decisions we're making. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Hughes. Any further comments from Cabinet colleagues? Councillor Falsey.
Thank you, Leader. The Conservative Party doesn't seem to have much interest in moving to a sustainable way of living, whether that's opening new coal mines or just not showing any interest in carrying through some of the fine words that they've once put out. However, some of the options that we're considering have been forced upon us by the financial pressures, but some of them also will have an environmental benefit as we work towards a more sustainable way of life and we work towards zero waste. So it's important that we think about our way of life and we think about how we behave and how our actions affect other people. And so I support the proposals outlined today. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Falsey. Councillor Petruni.
I was sitting here considering, everything that my colleagues said, and I think it's important to emphasise we are a Labour administration, and of course you would expect us to talk about Conservative government in Westminster. But it's important to recognise that Conservative councils in England are being smashed. It's not just Labour administrations. If you read the press, the Conservative leaders in Kent, in Hampshire, huge Conservative majorities are warning of bankruptcies given the scale of public cuts. That's Conservative councils warning their own government the scale of problems they're facing and the scales of cuts they're facing because of their economic mismanagement. So people looking into this cabinet meeting saying Labour, they would say that the Conservatives are saying that in England, in their heartlands. So it's not just Labour-run Newport. It's Conservative-run Hampshire. It's Conservative-run Kent going bankrupt if the UK government don't sort out the UK finances. What more can we say? But what I will say, this is a consultation, but we take financial responsibility seriously. Labour Party cleaning up a Conservative financial mess. Always the way, isn't it, Leader?
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Petruni. Councillor Marshall.
Thank you, Leader. A couple of days ago on social media, that there was a caller into the LBC radio station. Did actually get quite emotional, the fact of the caller was crying on the phone, saying about not being able to afford heating, and he'd probably be better off dead, which is not the place that we want our people in. And it's not just that one caller, it's people across the country. My colleague has already mentioned about the fact of it's not just in Labour-run authorities, it is across the country. Local government is really facing the challenges. But within that, the staff will always provide the support, and no matter what happens, There will always be people that care, the local authority cares, they will provide that support, whether it be our teachers or social workers or, our hub workers, whoever it may be. They deeply care with whatever they have, and they will continue to do so, because they are part of our communities, they work for our communities, and I think that's imperative, and what we always, must remember as local elected representatives. And I think within that, within the proposals there, it is, difficult, and, look forward to listening to what residents say. But, just ask residents to really put forward their views, so when we do finally make decisions, we can actually say that we have listened. It's from them. Collectively, as a community, we know what we want for our city, and we will get through it as well, as my colleague was saying. But we'll get through it because of the hard work of the staff and the hard work of our elected representatives and our community. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. And I'd like to thank you all as Cabinet colleagues, not just for the comments that you've made today, but for the contributions that you've made throughout this period in terms of the development of the proposals and the way that you've worked so closely with your service areas. It's really hard, and it is distressing for everybody to have to consider proposals on this scale. And I'd like to thank you all for the continued support that you've shown your service areas. So, just to reflect, £27 million is a significant proportion of our £343 million total budget. And just like households, we are facing that increase in prices, and the cost of delivering services increase as well because of that. And that affects everything, from our schools to our street lighting. With 2/3 of the budget fund in schools, education and social care, we are intent to ensure that we continue to deliver absolutely essential services to our most vulnerable and those who require a helping hand at these most difficult at times. But we've discussed today the grim economic forecasts that we continue to face, and this does mean that we really do have very limited options. And as you've all mentioned, and I will reiterate this because this is so very important when we're considering this, this situation has not been created by us. And more importantly, it hasn't been created by the people that we serve. But we are the ones that need to make these tough choices. So as a Cabinet, we will commit to looking closely and carefully at the responses to the budget as we finalise our plans in February. And I really want to emphasise that when I became the leader of this City Council, I stressed that we would be a listening council. We've taken that commitment further when the Council approved our corporate plan last month. The Listening Council is embedded within that plan. We will listen. We will listen to our residents. We will listen to our partners, our stakeholders. We will listen to those officers and the staff that deliver those all-important services for the residents of Newport. I would implore everybody, please, when the consultation opens, please consider the proposals and please respond. We will indeed be prudent in our approach to this, but we will always prioritise the vulnerable. I'd also like to highlight, in terms of the consultation exercise itself, that we will be asking residents about asset rationalisation too. And we're keen to hear the views of the people of Newport on what we should actually do with all these buildings that cost us a lot of money. We want to know what your ideas are, and we're here and we're listening and we're keen to really do that. One final point to add is that we recognise that there will still be a gap, and we will also consider prudent use of reserves to support this. But there are conditions related to that, and I would like to stress for those people who don't understand the situation with reserves and what they actually mean, that we cannot use our earmarked reserves to smooth out this process. However, we can reprioritise some of our reserves, and we will consider that as well. So in addition to considering the feedback from our residents, our staff, our officers, our schools staff, we will also consider everything. Everything is on the table here, and it's really important, people of Newport, that your voices are heard. So, formally then, colleagues, we're asked to agree the draft proposals go out to consultation. We're also asked to approve the implementation of the delegated decisions set out in Appendix 3 and Appendix 11 of the report, and this will be with immediate effect. And to note the position on developing a balanced budget for 2023-24, noting that the position will be subject to ongoing review and updates between now and the February Cabinet when the final budget will be agreed. Colleagues content to agree that report. Thank you very much once again for your contributions on that item, but also for the really, really considered way that you've approached this as we've developed our plans going forwards. We move then to the next item on our agenda, which is item number 6, the Capital Monitoring and Additions Report. This is on pages 217 to 242 of the packs that you received. And the purpose of the report is to provide an overview of the updated capital budgets for this financial year and the remainder of the capital programme window, alongside the projected outturn position as of October of this year. So the last report that we received in relation to this was the July monitoring report, which detailed, alongside the overall monitoring position, the exercise that was undertaken by officers to review the anticipated profile of spend for each scheme. There have been a number of additions and amendments made to the programme since then, and primarily these relate to grant-funded schemes. These total around £8.5 million and are detailed in Appendix A. They impact across multiple financial years, with £6.996 million added to 2022-23 alone. So as Cabinet, we're being asked to approve these additions to the programme. The total net impact for these additions and revisions are to increase the total budget for 2022-23 to £88.4 million. Now, against the revised budget of £88.4 million, expenditure totalling £71.1 million is projected, and the variance is comprised of £17.1 million of slippage and £191,000 of true net underspends and overspends. Cabinet are only asked to note the current forecast slippage, not to approve slippage at this stage of the year. Instead, slippage will be identified in each monitoring report, and only in the final report of the year will we be asked to approve a total amount to be transferred to future years. However, it is important to note there's a number of schemes which have forecast slippage figures, which include Schools Band B, the Transporter Bridge and the Leisure Centre. The report also outlines the current position in relation to capital headroom. The balance of headroom available takes account of commitments already reflected within the capital programme, as well as provisional additional funding to take the overall Band B funding envelope to £90 million, but which is not currently included on the capital programme, and therefore our capital headroom is currently around £1.789 million. Now, this is just an overview of the report today, and we are being asked to approve the additions outlined in Appendix A, note the slippage and the projected outturn position, as well, colleagues, importantly, of noting the amount of headroom still available. I'm just going to pause at that point for any comments that colleagues might like to make. Councillor Batruni.
Yes, Leader. I just wanted to make this quick point. thanking our finance staff for keeping up to date and the speed of change, particularly around the capital programme. I was looking at the factors that have made the capital programme shift like it's never shifted before in year and over the last couple of years, namely inflation volatility, the pandemic and the consequences on supply chains. And our finance team, both on this paper and the previous paper, have been absolutely fantastic. And I just want to pay a nod to them and their hard work. Leader.
Thank you very much, Councillor Petruni, and we all support your comments in relation to that. Are there any further comments from colleagues on that? Colleagues content to move the report? Thank you very much. We move then to item number 7, which is the report on the half-yearly Treasury management activities for 2022-23. And colleagues, as you will be aware, this is a compliance report to confirm whether Treasury activities accord with the Treasury strategy previously considered and set by members. The purpose of the report is to inform Cabinet of Treasury activities undertaken during the period from April 22 to the end of September 22 and confirms that all Treasury and prudential indicators continue to be adhered to. The report's been presented to our Governance and Audit Committee and is endorsed by them for onward consideration by us in Cabinet and ultimately the Council. In terms of the report on the half-yearly management activities, with regard to borrowing, the report highlights that as at 30th of September 22, borrowing was 140.6 million, a decrease of 1.5 million in comparison to 21-22 outturn levels. This is predominantly caused by our equal instalments of principal loans, which pays back principal over the life of the loan and therefore incurs less interest costs. And that's as an alternative to our maturity loans, where the principal is repaid on the final day of loan. Officers have flagged to us that as interest rates increase, there is an increased likelihood that our lender offer, borrower offer loans will be called in. And what this means is that the lenders will ask to amend the rates of these facilities upwards, or the borrower either accepts that increased rate or redeems the debt. So officers continue to monitor that closely. And current capital expenditure forecasts involve a degree of slippage, so it isn't expected there'll be a need to undertake further long-term borrowing this financial year, although this doesn't preclude external borrowing being considered if the situation is advantageous in acting as a hedge to manage interest rate risks. In relation to our investments, the level of investments at the 30th of September was £50 million and decreased by £8.2 million since outturn 21-22, as we use up such resourcing as a much more cost-effective and alternate to arranging new external borrowing. It's anticipated that investment levels will continue to reduce during 22-23 as an alternative to borrowing until we ultimately reach a minimum balance of £10 million. Which will remain invested for compliance. Market expectations for interest rates to start to revert to more traditional levels in the last quarter of 22-23, and it's sensible to avoid any long-term borrowing decisions in the short term while rates are vulnerable. This approach is a cornerstone of effective internal borrowing, and even in an environment of increasing interest rates, the cost of new borrowing is still more expensive than any increase in returns on investments, so it continues to make sense to use our existing surplus cash balances as an alternative to new borrowing. The final aspect that we need to consider, colleagues, are the prudential indicators. The authority measures and manages its exposure to Treasury management risks using various indicators which can be found in Appendix B. The report confirms that the Council continues to comply with the prudential indicators set for 22-23, other than one particular metric designed to highlight the risk to levels of interest receivable from investments should interest rates collectively fall by 1%. And if you read the report, colleagues, you'll see that officers explain the purpose of that indicator is to highlight how much the Council budgeted income levels would be adversely affected by any drop in interest rates. The deviation is more significant than the target due to the increased level of investments being made, and also creates a false impression as interest rates are experiencing a rising trend currently. Officers are aware that the risk will need to be closely monitored heading into 23-24. So, colleagues, you've had an opportunity to read the report, and I've presented an overview of the contents here today. Do you have any comments or feedback on the report before we agree it going forwards to full council? Councillor Petruni.
Yes, thank you, Leader. It was just to say the American inflation rate, I think yesterday or the day before, was much lower than the markets were predicting, and is leading to speculation that the Fed is going to ease its interest rate hikes and ultimately maybe reverse course. So I support the short-term strategy of internal borrowing because it seems like, and it's a massive seam, financial colleagues starting to worry, I suspect, that there will be a turn probably in 2023 given that the scale of possible recession fears. So it'd be prudent to maximise internal borrowing now and then look to long-term borrowing if interest rates do indeed drop, as the Bank of England and the Fed try to boost the economy.
Absolutely. Thank you, Councillor Petruni. Any further comments from colleagues? Is everyone content with the report and happy for that to go forward to full council? Thank you very much for that. We'll move then to item number 8 on our agenda today, and this can be found in pages 265 to 310 of your packs, and this is the Corporate Risk Register Quarter 2 update. Now, colleagues, as you'll be aware, the Cabinet review the risks presented in the Risk Register, Audit Committee review the risk management arrangements and governance processes, and of course they make any comments back to Cabinet. This report, therefore, will be presented to Council's Governance and Audit Committee in January 2023. At the end of Quarter 2, Newport Council had 42 risks recorded across the Council's 11 service areas. The risks that are deemed to pose the most significant risk in the delivery of our corporate plan and services are escalated to our Corporate Risk Register for monitoring. Now, at the end of Quarter 2, 14 risks were recorded in the Corporate Risk Register, 8 severe risks and 6 major risks. In comparison to Quarter 1, there were no new or escalated risks and 2 risks were closed. Now, the report does detail issues in regards to these risks, and I know that Cabinet members, you continue to monitor these closely through your service plans. I would like to highlight, though, the risk score, which has increased from 20 to 25 with regard to the delivery of children's services. We recognise the pressure that the level of demand is currently placing on our children's services. And during the last quarter, we are aware that Children's Services had to put in place measures to manage the increased volume of referrals into the Safeguarding Hub. We also know that for those colleagues who are working under these most challenging circumstances, with some of the most vulnerable people that we serve, this does put a pressure on staff. And we know that there's pressure on staffing across the service, and that the area is having to manage both sickness levels and recruitment. The service does work to ensure the most vulnerable and at risk are prioritised and ensure our statutory services are delivered. But it's absolutely of critical importance that we note the risk that we are facing with regard to this because of the pressures that the service are facing. We also see an increased risk with regard to our medium-term budget, and we know that this has increased from 12 to 20, as we've highlighted this evening as we've been through the plan. Now, Now, we recognise, although we've closed risks in relation to the COVID-19 pandemic and the post-EU transition risk, we recognise that COVID does continue to impact on our residents, and our civil contingencies team do continue to monitor this situation alongside our partners in health and Welsh Government. Since the UK left the EU, many of the arrangements that are in place are largely outside of our control as a local authority, but nonetheless we remain committed to supporting our communities and residents. And I will repeat again what I've said many times in our cabinet meetings. We want people to really understand that they are very, very welcome here in Newport. We are a city of sanctuary. We are a diverse city, and we welcome the really strong contribution that people from all different places, communities, countries make to our really diverse and vibrant community here in Newport. And our community cohesion team will continue to support residents. At that point, colleagues, I'm going to pause in terms of the presentation of the report and ask if there are any comments from Cabinet members. Deputy Leader.
Thank you, Deputy Leader. I would just like to comment on the three risks that are associated with my portfolio. Whilst they remain on amber, they all score 12. I think due regard and focus needs to come from myself as Cabinet Member, specifically, of course, to school finance and budget pressures. Clearly, it's amber at the moment, it's 12, and I've got to work hard with my school team and with schools to ensure it remains at 12, because clearly the impact of the budget is going to have some unwanted pressures on our schools, and that's clearly a worry. Additionally, out-of-county placements have been a concern for the last year, cost more than anticipated, but I know that we're repurposing, we're reconsidering how that will function going forward next year, so hopefully we'll be able to keep that low as a risk. And finally, of course, ALN and SEM provision is an ongoing pressure for us. More and more children need that level of care and support, and we've got the new LM bill that we're still implementing, so the costs and pressures are there, that we're still clearly keeping a focus on to helpfully keep that risk register exactly where it is, keep that focus to keep it where our priorities need to be. And I want to add as well, Leader, you're absolutely right in relation to a city of sanctuary. Absolutely support those who come to our city who need that level of support. They have skills that we absolutely need, and I believe they're welcome as residents in Newport. We are a diverse, inclusive city, and that needs to be remembered. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much for your comments there, Deputy Leader, and for the very close work that you do with our education service. Thank you so much. Councillor Marshall and then Councillor Hughes. On the same topic, I think.
Thank you very much, Leader. Mentioned about the children's services, and just to reassure those in briefings, we do ask obviously where we currently stand. So it is continuously monitored. It's not something that we leave off the agenda at all. It's something that we keep a regular focus on and can reassure that we are looking either to maintain or to lower where we can any opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Hughes.
I think I'll change tack then, Leader. Acknowledging the same as what my councillor colleague has said in relation to adult services, but I will mention the community cohesion side. On Sunday, I was lucky enough to visit a Hungarian community market in Newport. And these people have come to Newport, they've made Newport their home. Amazingly, many of their children now speak Welsh, and they've taken to Newport as their home city now. And it was an amazing event, to be honest. It was a lovely event in the sense that we always hear the negative aspects of what people coming to our country. It's always the negative we hear in the press. And the reality of the situation is that these are people who have chosen the UK, they've settled, and they're making a huge contribution to our city across the board in relation to working, paying taxes, the art that they bring, the culture, the music, and watching people from Newport attend a Hungarian event in Newport and eating different food and enjoying themselves was a real pleasure. And I think that just typifies now the way our city is going. If you embrace the positives, then what you'll get back is a very positive experience. Thank you.
Absolutely. Completely agree with that. Are colleagues then content to agree the contents of the corporate risk register and, of course, continue to monitor these risks? And this report, as I've mentioned, will go forwards now to Audit and Governance Committee. So, thank you very much for that. We'll move to item number 9 on our agenda today, which is the consideration of the consultation draft of the Gwent Wellbeing Plan for 2023-28. Now, the purpose of this report is to provide members with an update on the plan and to seek any comments from Cabinet as part of the statutory consultation process. Now, as you'll be aware, colleagues, there's a statutory requirement within the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act for public service bodies to produce a wellbeing plan. And as part of the wellbeing plan, we need to set objectives on how it will improve the economic, social, environmental and cultural wellbeing of our area by contributing to the achievement of the 7 national wellbeing goals. As you'll be aware, in July 21 we agreed that each of the 5 local PSBs, including one Newport, would merge to form a Gwent PSB, which would therefore strengthen partnership arrangements across the region. Now, as chair of the One Newport Partnership, which will become a local delivery group in relation to Newport, I can assure you that we will be working closely with all of our partners to deliver the objectives of the final plan. So in terms of consultation with regards to the wellbeing plan, the analysis of the needs assessments highlighted 3 key themes that our residents wanted to prioritise, and we've grouped these into the following draft objectives. So we want to create a fair and equitable Gwent for all. We want to create a Gwent that has friendly, safe and confident communities. And we want to create a Gwent where the natural environment is protected and enhanced to maximise the well-being benefits that nature provides to current and future generations. The report details each of the draft objectives and associated steps, and it's these that I'd like to draw your attention to. So the statutory 12-week consultation period for the draft plan closes on the 31st of December, and after this it will be amended and a final version will be presented to our council for approval and adoption in February 2023. And all of our other partner organisations will also need to sign off the final plan, and by the time we get to mid-April 2023, we'll be in a position whereby the Gwent PSB can sign it off with a view to publication in May 2023. Now, alongside this, and it's really important to note this, and in fact there was a meeting yesterday evening in relation to this, we continue to work with our One Newport partners and other key stakeholders to develop our local action plan to address the particular needs for our communities across the city. So, colleagues, I'm asking you to consider and note the contents of the report and put forward any comments that you may have as part of the statutory consultation in order to recommend that the final plan be presented to full council for adoption in the February meeting. Anybody got any comments? Councillor Petruni.
Thank you, Leader. Both are questions. It says what other areas could Gwent councils do to benefit all their communities? And I just wonder, I don't know if you're able to answer this, Leader, or an officer, do we share data amongst each other that makes us understand the particular nuances in each, and whether we analyse that properly and not just basic rudimentary poverty's high here, low there, but actually a detailed pattern analysis or even horizon scanning to understand where, when and how to deal with it. And the second question is I looked at the report and I saw the steps. How will they achieve the objective? And these are comments meant to be constructive, although my tone sounds very critical. But they're meant to be constructive. And then it says by reducing the impacts of child poverty. I'm just plucking one out. Great. We'd all love to do that. And then I said, then it says performance management. How will we know we are making progress? And it's blank. I just wonder, we need to have that filled out, because that's the key point. I don't think anyone disagrees about reducing poverty, but how do we know we're reducing it, what measures we're going to use, and how we're going to know we're making progress, all of us, collectively, as all Gwent partnerships? Just some observations.
Do you know, I'm really glad that you mentioned that, because actually that's something that came up at our meeting yesterday with the One Newport partnership, where we had quite a detailed discussion along some of those proposals. So just to be clear about the priorities, and I think this is something that does warrant, actually, emphasis. The first draft objective, which relates to creating a fair and equitable Gwent, is really a very, very ambitious commitment from all partners across the Gwent PSB area, because what that means is that we've made a commitment to becoming a Marmot area. So we're working with Professor Sir Michael Marmot to actually look at, and this for me is the most important aspect, we're looking at inequality across the whole life course, not at a point in time, not a snapshot. So in terms of the data that we look at, how we analyse it, how we look at those patterns, yes, of course, that is monitored and recorded as part of that. So that forms a fundamental part of how we will take that forward, both as a Gwent-wide partnership, but also critically, and for me, certainly, as the leader of Newport City Council critically, it's about how we deliver that in Newport. And we've got a really strong One Newport partnership. And our members of partnerships members were very, very keen last night to really work with us to ensure that we deliver what is right for the people of Newport. Now, currently, through One Newport, what we've actually got there are 5 intervention areas where we deliver against objectives, and we do monitor performance against them, and we can see a real difference being made through that. And we'll continue to work in that way in Newport to deliver on these revised objectives for the region. So I think it is important that we do recognise the value of data, but also appropriate interpretation of that data and how it can support us for planning going forwards. But I'd also really like to emphasise the role of other public sector partners within this partnership, because we've already got some excellent examples. If you look at the Jigsaw project that we've been involved with Newport City Council and the fire service, that's helped us to identify vulnerable households, not just here in Newport but across Monmouthshire as well. That's a really strong example of how this partnership working can really help to deliver and make a difference. So I'm really glad that you gave me an opportunity to emphasise the strengths of partnership working. Thank you. Any further comments? Councillor Hughes.
I'm glad you mentioned the partnership first side, Leader. I was going to acknowledge the work of the partner organisations myself, and you can clearly see how they've informed the objectives. I was thinking later in the day, reading the objectives, that they shouldn't just sort of be objectives for the wellbeing plan. They should be sort of objectives for society as a whole. They are ambitious, but reading this, you can sort of envisage how communities will, could and should be. They're admirable objectives. I think they're objectives that we can achieve. And if we do achieve them, what a fantastic change we'll make to the communities that we live in. So I just wanted to thank those really who contributed.
Thank you for that. And Councillor Hughes, it would be completely remiss of me not to thank you for the work that you do in terms of your representation of Newport City Council with the Regional Partnership Board, because that's another essential example of partnership working. So thank you very much for that. Any further comments on this item? Are members happy with the update? Thank you. Move then to item number 10 on our agenda today, and this is this report relates to the Newport North Joint Venture Partnership, and the report is on pages 317 to 322 of your packs. And colleagues, as you'll be aware, the partnership was created in 2014, and this is a joint venture between Newport City Council and Norse Group, and a public services company which is owned by Norfolk County Council. Now, the partnership itself provides an integrated property and facilities management service and also includes professional services as well. The initial contract term was 10 years, and this expires in June 2024. With this came the opportunity to extend by a period of up to 10 years. And any such decision in relation to this must be taken by the 30th of December 2022, and that's why we have this report before us today, as we need to make a decision. So this does provide us with an opportunity to review the arrangement and to consider our future requirements. As you know, our work with Norse has delivered a range of benefits to the Council and to the wider community. And I was absolutely delighted very recently to see the fantastic work that they've done at St Woolis Primary School. So there is a lot of very, very good work going on out there. Now, Norse manage a range of built assets for the Council with a total asset value of £320 million. And the joint venture provides a one-stop shop for all property services, also acting as our corporate landlord. The partnership itself has been the subject of annual scrutiny reports, and most recently in November 2022. And at this meeting, the positive progress made was noted, although matters raised included the service agreement and an emphasis on wider social and community value, which of course aligns with the aspirations of the Council's new corporate plan to place social value at the core of our activity. Taking into account the significant work being delivered by Newport North and the risks and potential benefits of the end of the partnership, the report proposes a short-term extension to the current contract with improved financial benefits in order to allow time to review the delivery model. This will also provide support for a programme of asset rationalisation as set out in our corporate plan and consider how we maximise community benefit from any future arrangement. So, colleagues, the recommendation that we have before us today is to extend the contract on revised terms to the 31st of December 2025, therefore reducing costs for the remaining period, and also to enable a review of the delivery model and support an effective transition. So, happy to support. Any comments? Okay, thank you all very much for that. Item number 11 on our agenda today is a paper on the Gwent Regional Integration Fund. Now, it's really important that colleagues have had an opportunity to scrutinise this report, the supporting evidence, and consider the recommendations that are being made. The report outlines the financial liabilities arising from the proposed tapering of the Gwent Regional Integration Fund and describes how the fund was established as part of the programme of government to drive and support transformation in social care and health across our public sector. The Regional Integration Fund was set up as a 5-year programme to leave a positive change and innovation to improve services for our most vulnerable citizens. The total pot remains in place for the whole 5 years. But, and this is the important point, the taper is proposed to release funding each year for new projects, while previously funded projects are mainstreamed. However, this fund came as a successor to the previous grant-funded programmes of the Integrated Care Fund. And many of the programmes previously funded by that are now funded by this fund are integral to the continued delivery of social care for adults and children's services. So this is really important to the work that we do and the work that we do for our citizens. Now, many of our services are managed and run regionally, but services solely for our residents actually receive over £2 million in regional integrated funding. in 2023-24, the first proposed year of the taper, we'd need to secure £396,719 in order to support the current services. So what that outlines is the impact of the proposed taper on funding and the pressure that would be placed on us as an authority in order to deliver that. Now, I'm sure we all support an ambition to deliver continued innovation and ensure that positive learning is a key part of the delivery of our services. And the proposed tapered funding would be a mechanism to release grant funding after piloting and trialling of new models. Sadly, however, colleagues, the change in the financial outlook would mean that the adoption of the taper would mean the ending of key services, as we would be unable to fund them through alternative budgets. All local authorities and health boards are currently considering the proposed tapering arrangements and the challenges that this new model now presents. The Gwent Regional Partnership Board is seeking the views of the partners in order to reach an agreed position. So, colleagues, I'm going to ask you that as a Cabinet you consider the financial liabilities and the implications of the Regional Integration Fund and its tapered funding model. And I'm going to pause at that point because I know Councillor Hughes, who represents us on the Regional Partnership Board, would like to comment on this item.
Thank you, Leader. I know that Newport remains committed to the RIF objectives and acknowledge the significant progress that's already been achieved. We want to see a transformational change delivered across the health and social care sectors that benefit the citizens of Wales and the City of Newport and, of course, the Gwent region. As you say, there's been significant economic changes since the establishment of the fund, and these have brought significant challenges in regards to the implementation of the taper. And the fear is that this will destabilise and undermine the core demands and the core elements of provision. So the implementation of the taper in 2023-24 would have a significant impact on core services and place additional budget challenges on social services budgets. And the key aspects of the report is that the proposed taper risks actually fatally undermining the achievements thus far. Now, I know that no one in the Senedd wants this, and I welcome the Minister's efforts to find a solution thus far. That is why the Regional Partnership Board leadership team is negotiating and seeking to revise the grant conditions. And I support the Regional Partnership Board's position and would recommend that this is the position that we take as a council moving forward. I can report that there is a unanimous position within the Gwent Regional Board on this between the local authorities and the Health Board, and I support the recommendations that are made.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Hughes. And it's really positive, isn't it, again, in terms of partnership working, that there really is consensus in relation to this particular issue. So we've considered, colleagues, the liabilities. They're outlined in the report and we've highlighted them here today. And also then, considering the challenges that we face with regard to finance and the proposed tapering arrangement, colleagues, are you content to support the Regional Partnership Board leadership in seeking to revise those grant conditions? Yeah, everybody happy to do so? Thank you very much for that. The next item on our agenda today is the annual report of the Director of Social Services, and this is in the packs from pages 461 to 664. So I do hope that you've all had an opportunity to go through this report. And as you'll know, that the Strategic Director, as the designated Director for Social Services, actually has a statutory duty to put together this report. And this report is actually a reflection of the personal assessment of our Director of Social Services, of performance of social services in delivering its social care functions during the preceding 12 months. The report covers the period from 2021-2022, and I think what's important to note, colleagues, because you obviously you will have read the report, that it's laid out in a format which is within the prescribed guidance. So we are asked that the information should be presented in this way. And I know that Sally's with us on the meeting, so before I go any further, I'd just like to invite Sally to offer any comments to Cabinet that she may wish to put forward.
Carried out throughout the year, and the way that we've been able to work despite everything that gets thrown really at us in some senses to deliver services for our most vulnerable citizens. Social care is a challenge, and we all know that. It's a challenge in terms of what we have to do and sometimes in terms of how it's perceived. But I think we should have nothing but pride in the work that our colleagues have delivered, despite all the odds really over the past year. So thank you, Leader, for the opportunity.
Thank you, Sally, and I'd like to thank you for the leadership that you've shown in this service area. As the report highlights, we have been through an incredibly challenging period, and staff across all of social services have continued to deliver. And despite the difficulties of 2021-22, our social services staff have been able to look beyond those relentless demands, and they've still delivered innovation and continued development of services. And it was very pleasing, Sally, to also welcome Welsh Government ministers to Newport to meet with some of our officers who've been driving forward some of this innovation in service delivery as well. And very pleasing to hear their feedback. Any comments from colleagues? Councillor Hughes, then Councillor Marshall.
Thank you, Leader. So, as we know, the report is retrospective, covering the period 2021-22. And this was a period where Chris Humphreys, as we remember, acted as the interim director at the time. And Chris was my very first manager in social work a very long time ago. So, like Sally, I'm hoping that she's enjoying her retirement at this present time. It's been a period of structural change with several changes in the leadership team. we have an exceptional team of managers at the moment who have and are still facing unprecedented social care challenges. So the social care teams responded to the challenges of COVID and the additional demands following the war in Ukraine and the ongoing demands of recruiting and the structural changes that they are facing. We have a social care sector who are resilient, compliant in regards to regulation and continue to promote best practice and keep the citizens of Newport safe. I'm glad the report also highlights the positive work and achievements that are being made, acknowledging the challenges. And in many respects, this was, I believe, their finest hour as a profession. I'm very proud as a profession. I know that many other professions are mentioned throughout the course of this, but for me, in relation to the social care staff that we've got across the sector, this was certainly for me their finest hour. So we'll continue to see unprecedented demand, I'm sure, and increases in referrals driven by crisis after crisis in Westminster. Our staff have been a credit to our city, but Leader, as the report covers the period 2021-22, I'd also like to take the opportunity to pay tribute to Councillor Paul Cochrane as well, who was actively involved through that period. And I'd also just like to thank as well the Director of Social Services now, Sally, in continuing the progress and work that's being done. She's inherited an innovative, very strong sort of social services structure, but at a time when they're under a very, very difficult period, really. And it's just to acknowledge the work that herself and the team are doing in taking forward the work of social care in the city. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Hughes. Councillor Marshall.
Thank you very much, Leader. Throughout the time of the report, there was a number of changes during very difficult times, and thank you for the extra financial support for the COVID and winter pressures from national government as well in terms of the Welsh Government. You're quite right to highlight about the proud innovational stuff that we do here in the City Leader, especially things like Baby and Me projects, with the international teams that we quite proudly spoke to ministers about. I know they went off with the announce of why doesn't every other local authority do the same? So that's always good, to go away with the knowledge that we're doing, best practice work. In terms of the report is clear, detailed, and discusses the services, both successes and challenges. It's very open and transparent within those. In that, I would like to thank the Director, the managers and all staff for the commitment and unwavering loyalty. And basically, for the authority, but also in the willingness to help others in what was still a difficult time at that time. We were still in the midst of COVID, a very worrying time for a lot of us. They ensured vital services were maintained and provided at the highest of standards, for our most vulnerable citizens, and yet remaining innovational throughout that. So very much appreciated, and know that, when we went out on the doors and clapping for NHS staff, especially I know a lot of colleagues were also remembering that the social workers were also in that. They also, went in at the times where we needed them. Thank you.
Thank you both there for your comments in relation to that report, and of course your recognition of the vital work that goes on across the city. Thank you both very much for that. So as I've already outlined, colleagues, it's a statutory annual report and it is the Director's personal assessment. So it's being presented to us for the purposes of information only, not for amendment. So are you content to note the contents and recommend that it is presented to full council? On a final point, and as you've already mentioned, colleagues, our Director of Social Services does emphasise throughout the report the commitment, enthusiasm and determination of staff to deliver the best possible services that they can. And I'd really like to thank all staff for their outstanding work during the period and their continued efforts to deliver social care across the city in very difficult circumstances. So thank you. Move then to item number 13 on our agenda, pages 665 to 672 of the packs. And this is the external pressures impacting on council services report. So we've discussed the financial challenges that we face as a council, and without a doubt it's been a really difficult and challenging 3-year period. We know that going forwards that we all face continuing financial challenges, and it's very difficult, isn't it? There are, as we've already discussed, so few choices left to us with regard to this. So just reflecting on that, what I'd really like to emphasise is the work that the City Council are doing with regard to supporting households with a cost of living crisis. There is some excellent ongoing work in relation to this, and this will continue. And I'd just like to emphasise the contribution that volunteers across the city make in relation to this. Where would we be without those people who give their time, their commitment and their love to supporting others who are really experiencing, huge challenges at this time? So I'd like to make that point as we go through this. And, colleagues, of course, we continue to support with regard to the Ukrainian refugee support, but also our wider asylum dispersal reports. And we know that the whole of the UK, sadly, is facing challenges, and very, very sad news today in relation to this. And the final point that I would just like to make once again is that Newport is a city of sanctuary, and we will continue to provide support to those who need it. Any comments on this report? Deputy Leader.
Thank you, Deputy Leader. I just want to focus on the points you're making with regards to our volunteers across the city. We're approaching Christmas, and the amount of volunteers I know working incredibly hard to ensure hampers are delivered to our families, to ensure that they're going to have food on their table for Christmas, not just basic food, but ensure that they'll actually have a Christmas dinner. And I know of many volunteers who are dressing up as Father Christmas currently and giving out Christmas gifts to our children. And not least our very own Councillor Spencer, I witnessed this weekend, who's now left the building, but he made an absolutely impressive Father Christmas, an absolute wonderful time. And I know that across the city there are many others who are dressing up in the next few weeks and will be Father Christmas for those children, particularly those children in our most vulnerable communities where we're ensuring that they will get something for Christmas. It is really commendable. And I suppose finally I would like to add into that is our schools, because our schools are working their very best to ensure that our children will have a wonderful Christmas and have a great time. And hand in hand that goes with that is the food vouchers that our education department ensure will be sent out to those children who are entitled to free school meals. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much for that. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Leader. I'll be very, very short, but just really following on from Deputy Leader there, and I don't want to sort of embarrass you here. I know on Monday, myself and you on the way home, we popped into St Mary's Church in Malpas to help wrap presents for the children of the area. What was, you know, there was the presents kept coming. So there was that side of it, and to be honest, I think if you weren't my partner, I would have still been rapping there, to be honest, the pace I was going at. But the importance of being is the volunteers there. It really wasn't about us. It was the volunteers there. Reverend Rebecca Stevens leading it, and all the little groups there, and the teamwork and the involvement. And it was quite humbling to see the volunteers and what they're doing at this time of the year. So I just wanted really to make that point, and a massive thank you, not just to those volunteers in Newport, but to everyone else.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Thank you for teaming up with me and acknowledging that my rapping skills are far superior to yours.
I have to say, just quickly, I've done some family rapping today, and I did take note of what you'd done, and I was a lot quicker than previous years. So.
Thank you. Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, like the rest of us, we're all rapping. Endless conveyor belt amount of toys, 668. At the moment, that's my running total. But on Friday, it'll be worth every minute because Ben Edmonds is going to be our Santa, and if Ben can't, because he was in the Grange yesterday, he wasn't very well. My other half, Councillor Harvey, is the Santa, and I have a feeling maybe it's the build of Councillor Spencer and Councillor Harvey is why they're wearing the costume. No, it's a different costume. We got our own, thank you. But on a serious note, without the army of volunteers and without the staff that we have, none of this could go ahead, because the volunteers just give it everything and then some. And I am always saying it, as you are yourself, Leader, our staff are phenomenal. And the way they dedicate and throw themselves into everything, every task that's asked of them, they all go above and beyond every single day, and without them we're nothing. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. Councillor Hughes.
Thank you, Lydia. I'm just going to mention a little bit about Killeen, if I can. It's as you'd expect. But I think this is the time of year for me when the town of Killeen comes together. I think you'll drive past and you'll see the Christmas tree on the common. You'll see the pubs and the restaurants coming together to support local charities. Huge amounts raised, by the Royal British Legion just recently, over £12,000 from Killeen itself in the space of 2 weeks. We've got the Kindness Exchange and Raven House Trust actively involved in the town, and there's just that real coming together in the community around Christmas, and these are all volunteers. And I think I just wanted to mention one in particular, which is the group that's actually working at the moment, linked to St Carrick's Church, who are setting up a hub in Killeen where people can come for information on, especially if they're struggling with financial issues, which is predominantly where that support is being requested. And again, another group of volunteers, and I think making a real difference. And I think that happens throughout Newport. It's not just Killeen. I'm bound to mention Killeen, obviously, but I know that that's going on throughout our city. And I just, really acknowledge as well that the support that the council gives these groups, that many of these groups that I certainly work with and my colleagues, I know wouldn't function without the support financially and from information, navigating sometimes the bureaucracy and how to sort of apply for grants. So I think, it is a partnership across the board. It's a partnership between volunteers and their communities, but also those groups and the local authority. And I thank you for that.
Thank you, Councillor Hughes. And I think what we've heard in relation to that this evening really is just a great example of, as you say, what's going on across our city, where people are giving their time and their commitment to help those who perhaps are experiencing difficult circumstances. So, huge thank you to everybody across the city for their involvement in all those voluntary activities, and of course to our Newport City Council staff for supporting it as well. So, the final item then, colleagues, is our work programme. Are colleagues content to support the work programme? Yeah. Okay, thank you all for your considered contributions today, and I'm pleased to say we can close the meeting there. Thank you.